We're now live, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this one-item meeting, which is a call-in for the Hawley Green paper that went to Cabinet on the 4th of October. Just so we start, have we got any apologies for absence, please, or substitutions?
You're on mute,
Nope.
Diane.
Oh.
Sorry, Chair. I do have one apology from Councillor B. Smith, and I have been advised that Councillor Rivron will be substituting for him.
Okay.
She's not here yet, so.
No. Okay. Right. I've agreed with Kirsty. Anybody wants to talk, can you put your little wavy hand up? And we'll try and monitor it that way rather than sending messages, if that's all right with everybody. Because it's easy to see on the screen, that's all, than jumping in and out. Any declarations of interest, pecuniary or otherwise? Councillor Dickinson.
Yeah, it's a little bit of an indirect interest. I'll be moving to the area in due course at an unstated time in the future.
You're not buying a house on Hawley Green, are you?
No, not on Hawley Green.
If you are, out. I've got to declare an interest because you'll see from the papers that I spoke for the Friends of Hawley Green at Cabinet, and it's only fair to say and transparent to say I have not changed my view from what I had at Cabinet. So I just thought I'd better mention that. But I'm chairing it, so that's the way things are. We were here, just a bit of background, we were here actually almost 2 years ago to the day, because back at the end of September, the Cabinet sought authority to release the land at Hawley Green from the Secretary of State. I think it was initially for housing, but at the time, it was challenged by the residents, there were a lot of them. And so it was called into Cabinet. Called into place until the 22nd of October, so it's not far off. Anyhow, the result of I thought a horse somewhere. The result of that calling was that Councillor Scullion agreed under one recommendations to ask the council to work with the officers and community to look at the possibility of a community asset transfer. So the wheels were set in motion 2 years ago at the call-in then. At the same time, it was also other developers were invited to have a look and see if there was anything to do about developing it. In those 2 years since then, Friends of Hawley Green have worked extremely hard to put an extremely good proposition together, which has been submitted to the council and has been approved by the council. So therefore the asset transfer is approved. At Cabinet on the 4th of October, however, the other option was to release the land for housing. But there hasn't been any work done on the housing plan or planning, or no planning applications have been submitted. So I'm just setting the scene for where we are. However, the Cabinet decided to go in favour of the housing, possible housing rather than the asset transfer. So given the nature of Cabinet, which is sort of a presentation and you want to get one bite at the cherry, whilst the Cabinet members, obviously, you can't have a debate at Cabinet, it doesn't work, so I understand that. But this is an opportunity for Friends of Hawley Green to have a say and respond to the reasons why the Cabinet decided to set this asset transfer aside in favour of a possible but not guaranteed housing development. So the paper's been called in by Councillors Baines, Lee and Regan, wherever you are, Dickinson. So first of all, I'm going to invite Councillor Dickinson to explain why he's called it in. He might want to do it briefly and pass on after that, and then he will call in Friends of Hawley Green to speak after that. And then I'm going to kind of throw it open to everybody else. So, Councillor Dickinson, do you want to start the ball rolling?
Thank you, Chair. You've anticipated my move. I do want to make only the briefest of introductions. I will, in all likelihood, be wanting to come back later. I do appreciate this was a difficult decision to have been made at Cabinet. And much was made of the need for the affordable housing. I really just don't feel as though enough was made of the amenity value of the land for the community. In the minutes of the first call-in, it actually states that there was negligible amenity value of the land, and I would strongly dispute that. And I think that's been very clearly demonstrated by the Friends of Hawley Green. We're talking about between 20 and 29 houses reduced from an original of about 44, and there was much discussion in the Cabinet about the need for the affordable housing, and I do understand that, and I do appreciate that. However, what I think got lost was the greater good that the amenity value of that housing of the green land there offers to the community. It's been very clearly established about the access to nearby amenities of Shibden Park. There's the small park at the bottom of Boothtown behind the church there. But I think there is a greater good for the existing residents, both in terms of long-term mental well-being and also physical well-being, access to green space, and the association. This is well-worn rehashing, so I am going to keep that fairly brief, and I will be wanting to come back a little bit later with another point. However, I think really, with your permission, Chair, I think now would be the good time to bring in Nicole Jones, who represents the Friends of Hawley Green.
Yeah, that's fine. Stephen Baines, Stephen Lee, okay for me to go to Friends of Hawley Green first, because you called it in as well, so you might want to say something later. But
yeah,
thank you, Chair.
I think the Friends of Hawley Green have put a lot of work into this, and they've put this case together, and I'm just supporting them as their ward councillor, and I'm quite happy to them to speak after they've, whenever you think fair, after they've put their case across.
Yeah, okay. Nicole,
I feel the same way as Councillor Baines. I'm interested in this from a number of overarching areas of policy, as well as, of course, in trying to do my bit to help the Friends of Hawley Green to save this very valuable amenity space. But I'm very happy to hear the presentation now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So over to you, Nicole, if you could.
Okay, so myself and Rachel are going to flip between our different points, if that's okay.
That's fine.
So firstly, I'd just like to thank you all for giving us a chance to speak again and to further consider the community asset transfer. The Friends of Hawley Green continue to be passionate about the right decision being that this space is transferred to the community, and that a housing development at Hawley Green would negatively affect public health. As we currently stand in the second lowest area in the borough for green space. The Conservative government laid out that one of its main manifesto commitments in 2019 was for everyone to have an extra 5 years of healthy, independent life by 2035, and to narrow the gap between the richest and poorest. Our plans fully complement this at a time when central government and Calderdale Council has set its sights on building back better, fairer, greener and healthier. Our unique plans fully support Calderdale's 2024 vision, a place defined by our innate kindness and resilience, by how our people care for each other, are able to recover from setbacks and are full of hope. A great place to visit, but more importantly, a great place to live. Providing a place for the community to come together for greater well-being and sharing our heritage in our area complements that. Our plans are targeted to expand the space to provide to support the active Calderdale missions and goals. This space is ideal to make physical activity embedded in part of the day-to-day life within the area. We have already run Tai Chi and rugby sessions for the Claremont and Boothtown community, an area where the number of residents admitted to hospital with heart and lung disease is much higher than the national average. in an area where in 2019-2020 data showed that 65.5% of adults were overweight or obese. Availability to green spaces to exercise and enjoy the outdoors are in short supply in our locality, and to dispose of this land for housing development will only contribute to a rise in physical inactivity, thus further contributing to the ongoing poor public health situation within our locality. Our plans prevented further negative impact to the climate change emergency, which is being declared as Calderdale Council's #1 priority. Yet here we suspect that housing allocations, wherever they are situated, are taking precedence over that, which would mean that the statement #1 priority is not true. We are already in an area rated the second worst category for access to green space, according to the Friends of Earth. Our plans would improve the biodiversity while providing educational opportunities to the local school children to fight for our climate. The site runs parallel to an AQMA designated site, and it's an important fact that we must not overlook when we are considering the needs of the tenants on the list. We wonder if it is in their health interest to house them in an area which the council knows to have air quality problems. In fact, this would actively work against the government's objective to increase life expectancy by placing them in an area which would be deprived of recreational green space and which is known to border a high pollution area, in preference of a plan which seeks to lower the effects of carbon emissions for the existing residents and provide a place to engage in physical activity, thus having a positive impact on public health. It was highlighted that our plans satisfy many of the Calderdale Council's key initiatives and strategies, but unfortunately that doesn't help you to meet one of your needs to meet the government housing targets.
There's a lot of talk about difficult balancing act faced to the council. We wholly understand the difficult decision. Isn't this why there are policies in place to help guide good decisions? We appreciate the pressure the council is under, but even the Prime Minister himself recently stated that the priority should be the development of brownfield, not greenfields. Whilst Hawley Green was originally classed as a brownfield site following the slum clearances, it can no longer be classed as such. It should be considered green space. Whilst the council seeks to deliver its housing strategy, it must accommodate green spaces to coincide with housing developments, to prevent large urban sprawl and provide community amenities. With a wealth of true brownfield sites in the borough, it is very difficult to comprehend why the council would want to concrete over the last green space for residential use in Claremont when there are alternative options available to them, which would allow them to meet the quota assigned to Hawley Green elsewhere. Councillor Fenton Glynn spoke emotively about being the voice of the 29 families the development would offer homes to, but his statement was factually incorrect for the following reasons. After speaking to Together Housing, the list of individuals on the waiting list are ranked in order of priority, according to their personal circumstances, so there is no guarantee that these houses would be for families. The site is designated as mixed tenure, which will comprise of affordable housing for sale, shared ownership and social housing. Only the social housing element will reduce the list and will not be for 29 families unless the number of houses designated for the site is increased. Who is to stop private landlords buying the affordable houses and renting them out, or even someone buying or selling for a profit? At the panel, it was stated that 8,000 households are on the waiting list for housing, and that we are not meeting our annual housing requirement of 1,038 new homes per annum. With the facts from Together Housing, this site would not deliver 29 new family homes. It would be likely to cover 20 or push 25. This would not even cover 2.8% of the annual housing target and reduce the waiting list by only 0.3%. So very limited progress to the housing challenge, but at the cost of disregarding Calderdale Council's Vision 24, Active Calderdale, tackling inequalities and tackling climate emergency priorities. By reversing the decision to release the land to Together Housing and deliver our business case, Calderdale would be realising its own ambitions and policy initiatives.
We understand that houses are needed locally, but with over 1,774 homes reported in 2020 as being empty for a period longer than 6 months, and that figure increasing to 2,703 as reported on the Freedom of Information response at the 19th of October. Long-term empty dwellings and potential brownfield sites across the borough should be the focus first and foremost, rather than denying a local community of green space. According to the Housing Delivery Report at Place Scrutiny on the 25th of February this year, North Halifax could see 1,700 new homes mainly built on brownfield sites. So how has the last bit of green space in Claremont been determined as more preferable site than rejuvenating brownfield? On the 20th of October, the Evening Courier ran a feature that Northgate House multi-million transformation was nearing completion for office space. I can't help but think that the disused council buildings could have been better put to use by being renovated for housing to accommodate the people on the waiting list. This was a large site that could have housed many of them, more so than a small number of homes at Hawley Green. Seeing plans to shut local libraries and such, I wonder whether the council could put their unused buildings forward for housing. According to the Housing Delivery Report at Place Scrutiny, I've repeated myself. The Office for National Statistics reports that the average household size in the UK is 2.4. The redevelopment of 2,703 long-term empty dwellings in conjunction with the construction of 1,700 homes on brownfield would see 4,403 dwellings constructed. Based on the average household size, this would provide homes for 10,567 people. In addition, reviewing former commercial units in town centres and redundant properties within the council's estate, we would make significant progress in meeting the housing demands for local residents by only utilising brownfield sites, and the green spaces could be preserved to aid the council in meeting their other long-term commitments to public health and the environment. The council has agreed that empty homes should be a priority. Indeed, this was called out as the part of the We Are Still Calderdale update this year. I quote, "Empty homes are a wasted resource, especially when there is a housing shortage. Homes empty for longer than 6 months can also start to have an adverse impact on adjoining properties and communities. Issues such as disrepair, fly tipping, antisocial behaviour and decreased property values can all result in area decline if unresolved. We appreciate that this can be more challenging to manage than the sale of council land to Together Housing, but surely tackling this could provide properties that would reduce the waiting list by more than 0.3%, and it would eradicate many of the problems reported as associated with empty homes at the same time. Win-win. Hawley Green is a place for the community to come together and remain active. It certainly seems short-sighted and against many of the council's own policies to concrete over this green space. For over 50 years, it has become the well-loved green, with many residents recalling how they played there with their children, and now it's their grandchildren's turn. Taking away our last piece of green space that has been essential during the pandemic and beyond will certainly not provide a vibrant community for all families to benefit. The land management charity, the Land Trust, completed a survey around green spaces. Over 90% of people who completed that survey said that they think spending time in green spaces has had a positive effect on their mental and physical health. With people using green spaces for exercise, nature watching, or spending time with their family, it's had a positive impact on their mental health and their resilience to the pandemic. This resonates strongly within our community and is central to our plans to continue to improve the standard of living for our residents in Claremont and our border Booth Town, an area that is considered to consist of high deprivation and poverty. As Hawley Green site is within a close enough proximity for Booth Town residents to travel to it by foot, if able-bodied, or by local bus route, they would have an access to an area which is free to use and which is complementary to public health and active Calderdale under our plans. extending the urban sprawl in a location that has already lost a significant amount of land to housing seems to be an ineffective strategy for Calderdale to meet its longer public health obligations. With an intrusive site survey being required to even access the suitability of the plans and planning permission still to be granted, potential land drainage issues, known problems of site access, potential contaminated land, challenges with air quality, all which could require mitigation at additional cost. There's a lot of uncertainty and risk associated with such a small impact to the waiting list.
At Cabinet, many of the factors mentioned by Nick Cole-Jones were overlooked. Returning to the fact that Calderdale Council has declared climate change as their #1 priority, we need an answer to the question of how situating housing in an area already saturated with housing, and with the knowledge that the local primary school has reduced its intake by 30 places, how is it in the interest of climate change to build housing where families are forced to travel out of the area for primary education provision? Furthermore, how can they expect families of low income, as they are seeking social housing, to afford this travel 5 times a week? In addition to this, how is it sustainable and in the interests of public health to knowingly erect housing on a site which borders an AQMA, especially for people higher on the ranking list who would be considered more vulnerable to lower life expectancy? There was so much discussion when we met at Cabinet about the need to be the voice of the 29 families who needed homes, or should I now say the 20 families? Well, Nicole and I are here to represent and to be the voices of the hundreds of families of Boothtown and Claremont. We represent Tilly, who is upset and wanted to talk to you tonight. She uses the green to meet up with school friends, especially during lockdown. It was great for social distant meeting when school friends hadn't seen each other for months. She uses it to play football, kick around with her dad at the weekend. She's been poorly this week, but a walk around the green to get some healthy fresh air was just enough before she was worn out.
We represent Anne, who has lived in the area since 1975. She has seen many changes in the area over the years, including the campaigning that the late Thelma Atkinson spearheaded to have the previous building plans dropped. She has seen the Liberal Club go, the church closed down, and her own back garden view has been changed by many new builds. In her words, younger people are now campaigning really hard on behalf of our community. Words of condemnation are very welcome, but these words are hollow if not followed with affirmation that the residents of Claremont can continue to enjoy and ultimately enhance Hawley Green for the physical, mental and spiritual well-being of the community, and show that Calderdale really does care.
Thank you. Nicole, is there much more to go? Because I've got people itching to speak here. Is there?
We're very nearly done. Nearly done.
Thank you. Cheers.
We also represent Craig, Thelma's son, whose first memory is playing football on the green for Claremont Boys Brigade. The green has been a very important part of his and his parents' lives, making friends, daily chats with those that walk their dogs, families playing with their children, and residents from Claremont Hot House. Since his mum passed away 3 years ago, the green has become even more important to his dad, as it's helped him through his grief and, more importantly, not to feel alone, which has been vital for his mental health. Being able to chat and wave to his friends passing and making new ones. Without this space, where would he go?
Represent Annabelle, who loves taking her children for a run out there. It's a chance for them to let off some steam and it's very safe. The only other green space she can walk to in the Claremont area is Claremont Park, but it's out of the way, can get dark and lonely and extremely boggy. She says this is our only decent green space, and if it goes, we won't have any.
We represent the local care home whose residents would love to enjoy outdoor space, and our plans will allow them the accessibility to do so.
We represent Salterley Primary School, who would be able to enjoy outdoor recreational space and a sports day, a much needed resource for a school with no outdoor sports field provision, thus helping them to increase time spent being physically active and reap the associated health benefit.
So for the families who go there to kick a rugby ball around with their grandparents or to learn how to ride their bikes, the ducks, Jack and Vera, that regularly come to visit, and the deer that grace us with their appearance every now and again. The young people who go there to clear their head after a difficult day, the neighbours who meet there to walk their dogs and have a chat in a safe space, the lady who struggles to walk but can get to the green and feels better bumping into new people to talk to, the residents of Claremont House who need a green space on their doorstep as life has thrown challenges at them that make it impossible to go further afield to enjoy the outdoors, the deprived residents living close by who need a free place for recreation to be active, and finally the families who already live there, who use the land in many recreational forms and who are willing to assist our plans to preserve Hawley Green as the vibrant hub within our community.
Our plans promote inclusion, champion public health and build strong community bonds. Furthermore, our plans actually put climate change as the #1 priority and align with many of Calderdale Council's own policies. Yours seek to destroy all that for the sake of just 29 houses. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thanks for that. There's quite a lot of stuff there to deal with. For those people listening who don't know what AQMA is, it's an acronym for Air Quality Management Area, because Claremount's got one there, because it's near where it is, near the flyover, it's got bad air quality. So just in case you're listening, you don't understand what it is. Now, Scott, I expect you want to come back on some of that. Is there anything from housing here as well, for speaking for housing?
I think we have Steph Furness and George Patterson from Together.
Right, because there's a lot about the housing, the potential for housing on that site anyway. So do you want to go first, Scott? Then I'll pass on to them.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Chair. And clearly, can you hear me?
Yeah,
sure. And any of the gaps, I'm sure George and or Steph will pick up. I was trying to note down everything there, but didn't necessarily pick up everything. So yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Scrutiny members. So clearly this is, I have now got the housing portfolio that previously Councillor Scullion had back when this was last called in 2019. To set the context a little bit, last time this came for a decision, Place Scrutiny asked for the development of the concept of the community asset transfer, whilst also referring to the original Cabinet report and its need for that adequate housing. I know a lot of work has gone into that community asset transfer. I think we've all read the report, really impressive work. And I know that it was massively supported by the council as well throughout that time, the council's housing team. Worth mentioning though that asset transfers are a discretionary process within the council, and that's an important part to mention. I think what I'd like to say is the reality though, there was a mention about central government and some of their requirements about housing and recreational green space. But the reality is that central government though are tasking us to deliver X amount of housing through the local plan process, and also through the housing delivery process as well. And that's across Calderdale. It's very, very difficult. Mention was given about brownfield sites, and that would always be the preference. The problem in Calderdale is that a lot of our brownfield sites are ex-industrial and have their own groundwork issues. So it's not always entirely possible to do that to the point where housing developers or our registered providers are able to properly put together a development plan. So it's crucial that we take sites like this not in isolation, as was mentioned, but part of a larger housing delivery strategy across the borough. It's worth mentioning that this is one of sort of 10 housing projects being delivered with Together Housing. That's not counting a pipeline of other projects with other registered providers and other developers across the borough. So it is not just Hawley Green. It is a network of other sites across the borough that we are trying to make sure that the many people who are on the housing waiting list are able to access. As I mentioned in the sort of cabinet meeting a few weeks back, and was mentioned just recently by Miss Jones and Rachel, there is sadly no voices here being represented tonight. We know there is need locally with over 400 housing applicants in the near vicinity. There's definitely a crisis nationally for people who need decent, affordable housing, and this site would hopefully help to do that, as I said, as part of a pipeline of projects. As mentioned, some sites would be for sale, some would be for rent, and certainly a decent proportion of them would be affordable. It's in a very central location. Coming back about the climate emergency aspect of stuff, I think it's important to mention that climate emergency is one of our 3 corporate priorities, as well as reducing inequalities and building sustainable towns. And I think they're all interlinked in a big way. And actually the idea of building energy efficient, good local housing so that people have the ability to live a larger life within Calderdale, access the economy, build the economy, bring their skills, is a really important factor in while we're talking about that. We want people to stay within Calderdale, work here, bring up their kids here. That's certainly why I moved to Calderdale. It appealed to me for a plethora of reasons. It would help sort of address that in many ways. Sorry, I just made a list of notes about the things that you were saying. What I want to move on to though is important, which is about Together Housing specifically, and the benefits potentially to the community, and also the have your cake and eat it aspect. The reality of the site is that not all of it is developable. And looking at your map, I could sort of see that you had big plans for the sloping off area, and I don't see any problem with some of those bits being able to be maintained, whether that's your idea for wildflower meadows, for planters and raised beds, and for some tree planting as well. With Together Housing, I think it's worth really looking at what they've done with Beach Hill, and how they've worked with the local community there. They set up a residents liaison board who works really closely with them every step of the way, and that's about putting in cycle infrastructure, cycle routes, walking access, about really creating a sense of place within that community, and have really been a key sort of strategic partner while developing that site. And I think, and George may want to go on to talk a little bit more about this, but that isn't something that's just been paid lip service. And I think that's something that would very much be at the heart of the development of this site for housing upon it. They'd be energy efficient, as I said, low impact, using sustainable building techniques, and wouldn't just benefit the local community in terms of housing, but would also create jobs in the construction that would sort of build that. Like I say, it can be what it needs to be for the community. I don't think the idea of concreting over that space is something that Together want. It's certainly not something that the council want. And that site can be a green and pleasant land plus deliver housing across the borough. That you've only got to look at the site at Hipholme and Lightcliffe that's just being developed, that is put forest walks through it, that is really putting the idea of accessing green space, active travel at its core, and I think that's the place we need to be at. We do have the local plan coming through as well, which also makes reference to sustainable houses, passive house, making houses fit for the future and fit for people to live in. So, I mean, I hope I've tried to sort of cover some of it. I don't think that, I think the reality is that an awful lot of work went into that asset transfer, and that's really noted. And I think what the reality is that's a helpful document for Together potentially to go away with and think about what the community wants. It doesn't need to be the end of the desire for that place. I want to talk a little bit about air quality, and sure, it is near one of our AQMAs. All local councils by national law have to have air quality management areas where the air quality exceeds or has exceeded certain levels. We do have a very big strategic and operational air quality management groups within the council. We just met last week as we're trying to relaunch and really reinvigorate how we manage those spaces, and we really look towards making sure that places are sustainable, have active travel and links to local amenity. I know you've got Shibden Park nearby and actually access to Halifax Town Centre as well. So any possibilities to mitigate car use in those spaces is all going to be part of the puzzle about delivering sustainable towns and reducing inequalities and delivering on the climate emergency. So I'll try and I've made a little bit of a note of some of the points that were made up by the Hawley Green Friends of Hawley Green Association. But in the meantime, anything I've missed, I'm sort of invite George and Steph to pick up, and then I'll try and come back on any of the specific points raised.
Thank you for that, Scott. Guys, yours a short one because I'm nearly going to go to Together and Steph for the housing update. Do you want to read your now?
Yeah, I can be fairly quick. I think when it comes to looking at the future use of this important piece of land, it's a matter of who do you trust and what they say they're going to do. And I must say that personally, after my various run-ins to Together Housing over the years, I put myself firmly in the camp of the Friends of Hawley Green on this. And I will be siding with them, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Guy. Well, Together Housing Group, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah,
okay, thanks. So I think Scott obviously covered a lot of that. Probably some practical things I need to talk about. This site at Hawley Green shouldn't really be considered as a site on its own. Back in 2018, Calderdale Council and Together set up a partnership called the Calderdale Together Housing Investment Partnership. And that partnership was set out to deliver over 500 homes across Calderdale over a period of some years. Now, so far, we have delivered on a number of sites, and we've done that in partnership with Calderdale, complete partnership. Any site that's agreed, any homes that are built are done in partnership by the partnership board, which is an equal board. There's two of us from Together. There's Councillor Patient and the director, Sheila, now for Calderdale. And it's agreed at that board what will be built, whether it be affordable homes for rent, for shared ownership, for sale. So the Calderdale Council have still got a full part in that decision when it goes to that board. So I hear the point that Councillor Beach made, but the decision will be made jointly by Calderdale and Together at that point in time. What I would say is that, and I think there is a very strong case from the Friends of Hawley Green. They made a case very well. We'd be more than happy to discuss the document with them, but we know it's absolutely crucial for Calderdale to have new homes built in the borough. That's why we set the partnership up in the first place. Now, Hawley Green Road was one of those sites agreed in 2018. It's coming forward from Calderdale. We've managed to deliver a number of sites which are really difficult. Beach Hill is the key one there. And again, Hawley Green Friends, they talked about empty homes. We've demolished 500 empty homes across the borough, and we're building new homes in Calderdale to better standards for local people. Beach Hill is probably the best example because it's the biggest one. 106 new homes being built on that estate just as you come into Halifax. It's a crucial site for Calderdale. Those homes will be replacing 3 old multi-storey blocks that got demolished at significant cost by Together. We're building homes that will have a local lettings policy, and that's something that we can look at in the Hawley Green site as well, so that the homes can go to local people. It will also look at if there's any potential individuals who may have special needs in terms of adaptations. We're doing that at Beach Hill as well. So this site is not just about 29 homes at Hawley Green. It's about the overall partnership between Calderdale and Together and delivering over 500 homes over a 5-year period in the borough. We're on site at the moment at Abbey Park in Beach Hill with over 200 homes. There's future sites in the pipeline at what was Rawson Wood. We're looking at Beach Grove in Brighouse, and we spoke to councillors there about that site and the potential for even putting a shop on that site. So there's lots and lots going on in partnership. So my key point I'd like to make to the council are 2 or 3 key points. One is it's done in partnership with the council. Please don't see this site as one individual site. And there is a strong argument from the Friends of Hawley Green. I don't deny that, and we would be more than happy to consider what they want. But this is one of the key sites for us to deliver housing across Calderdale. And finally, the partnership board is made up of a true partnership between the council and Together Housing. We're a not-for-profit organisation, as are the council, and we want to build these homes at Hawley Green for local people to very good standards. Councillor Patient has talked about, the green agenda. We're very much committed to that, and we'd like to bring in more employment in building these homes at Hawley Green. I'll pause there. There's about other questions, Chair.
Okay. Can I just ask you something, George? As you're aware, 2 years ago, when this went to a call-in, you were Together in Housing were competing, for a better word, with the asset transfer. They've done a lot of work since then, but Together haven't done anything on the site. They haven't done any testings. They don't know how many houses they can build. They don't know if it's a feasible site. It might not. I don't know when you propose to do it, but it could be another 2 or 3 years yet. If it doesn't stack up, then you won't be doing it, presumably. And if you do it, it's going to be a split of 30-30, presumably shared ownership, private and affordable. So is there any way you can guarantee that this is going to produce affordable housing and a date for it?
Yeah, on that, Chair, we would say that we've done an outline design that shows 29 homes on the site. The composition of the homes, i.e. how many for rent, how many for sale, that will be agreed with the council in partnership. We're also very happy to look at, and Scott mentioned this, around the edges of the site, or if there's bits of the site that we can develop, cycle paths or something we've done. Green, I think there's something in the local plan that we've considered around the requirement for allotments, or indeed it says in the planning agreement that if we should either create allotments on part of the site, or the quality of the Hawley Green recreation ground should be enhanced, because the Hawley Green recreation ground is nearby. So we're committed to doing all of that. We've been very busy with other sites in the pipeline, waiting for this to come forward. We wouldn't do lots of intrusive works until we knew that we got a council decision to say, yes, you've got the approval now to build land on the site. If we get the approval today, or if it goes back to cabinet or whatever, when we get that approval, we'll be on that site very soon afterwards. It's very close to Beach Hill. We know the area. We've seen the area with local councillors, and there's no doubt that would be a good site for new homes in Calderdale.
Okay, thank you. It's Steph there. Do you want to say something, Steph? Yeah, I saw you waving.
Thanks, Chair. I will say something briefly.
Yeah, okay.
Very briefly, I completely understand it's a difficult balance, housing development and open space generally, as well as on this site. I'm here obviously to talk about the housing development. And Calderdale's had a very difficult challenge over the last few years. We've not met our annual affordable housing target for a number of years. We've not met our overall housing target for a number of years. And that means that the council is at real risk of losing its planning powers across the borough. That will be implications on sites all over in different communities. And these, as Councillor Patient said, are nationally prescribed government targets that we have to adhere to, as do other local authorities. I know from the work that my team do, we are focused on brownfield sites as well. My team supports a number of applications that have gone into the Brownfield Housing Fund, the combined authority. North Halifax and some of those sites up in North Halifax are part of that. So we do try really hard to gather funding together to deliver new housing on brownfield sites. Empties, it's not my area within the council, but we also need them to come forward. And I think it's the case of we need everything to come forward in a sustainable way to meet our housing targets. The new homes that we built at Hawley Green, if they get built, they'll support people to move out of fuel poverty as well. There are a number of positives that will come forward from it. And I suppose my last point is, we've already referenced there's over 400 applications on the housing register for people who want to live in the Boothtown, Claremont area. They might be people who already live in the area. I've not gone down to that level of detail. We had the recently completed scheme in Boothtown for over 40 homes, and it still remains at over 400. I'm not sure how we'll get new homes built in the area for those people who want to stay in the area without this site coming forward. It will remain a challenge. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor River on and then Nicole.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies, I've had a lot of technical difficulties. Obviously, it's always going to be a difficult balance between open spaces and affordable housing. And obviously, this area has great value for the people in the immediate vicinity, and it's important issues about accessibility. But I've got to say, as a Booth Town resident who's lived there for 30 odd years, I found it difficult to recognise an area I know very well from this report. In 9.2, you say it's a mile to Shibden. It's 10 minutes walk from the end of Claremont to the top car park. I've done it loads of times with my dogs and my children, and I don't walk particularly quickly. I mean, if it wasn't dark, I would actually be able to see the open country above Claremont Road from my window. It depends on how you draw the lines in terms of the confines, but you know, you're a few minutes walk from farmland, open countryside, you know, some fabulous walks that takes you to the skirts of the Shibden Valley. So I think to suggest it'll just be urban sprawl if this area goes really doesn't fairly reflect an area I know very well. Any loss of open space is a real concern. There's very valid points made about pollution, and certainly the issues around accessibility are important. But I say, as a Booth Town resident, if I got the bus at the end of Claremont Road, I'd walk the 10 minutes to the top of Shibden, or I'd walk the 5 minutes up until the open countryside around there. So I do think we're slightly overstating the significance of this to the wider Booth Town area. That's not to say its loss would not be a serious concern. It would, and there's very valid points made around the accessibility of the area roundabout. But, you know, as a homeowner myself, as a certain age, I think it's really important people of my age don't pull up the ladder to people who desperately need homes and see very little chance of ever having a home of their own. Successive governments of whatever colour have unfortunately, by just addressing issues like brownfield sites, not managed to build sufficient houses or anywhere near meet the housing targets, and that's the position we are as a council. Courageous successive governments, again of all colours, for example, the Conservative government of the 50s, had great success with housing by making tough decisions sometimes about open spaces. And so with some regret, I think we would have to say that we have to give preference to those people who never see a chance of getting a home, and try and improve what has really been a pretty dire record on providing housing.
Thank you. Nicole, followed by Councillor Taylor.
Okay, I'll just start in response to Helen there. She's correct that you can look around the tops of Claremont and see fields that are privately owned, though, that we can't go into because we're not able to. They're not owned by the council, so we can't. It would be trespassing going on their land. The recreational ground that is above us is very difficult to access. It's always overgrown with nettles. It's never maintained by the council. The play equipment's been taken away slowly over the years. So this really is the only green space that is flat and accessible to all. And we are driving our plans based on inclusion. So this is accessible to everybody. I think Rachel might be able to provide, I don't know whether he will, but some backup evidence that Shibden Park was determined as too far away from us to be accessible outdoor area in our locality. I don't know whether you know where that came from, Rachel. Might have been the inspector's report.
Yeah, so it's been classified as it cannot be considered a local green space under the access to green space measurement.
That's the one. Thank you, Rachel. Now, this is the last bit of green space within Claremont, but we've never said we won't have any more housing in our area. Our ward councillors actually offered the land behind the Archers as a potential area for housing development. So we've never refused it. We just wanted it in an area that didn't make us lose our last bit of green space that we can, you know, enjoy recreationally. The people living behind the Archers had said before that they have quad bikes and everything going on in the summer, so they would welcome housing there. They would want it to prevent that. I think it was refused based on accessibility, but I don't think that that's, you know, there could easily be made a road at the side of it, of the conservative, not the concert, yeah, the Conservative Club to access that land. So a couple more points. Together Housing don't want to go in on you guys and discredit you, but I've done a bit of research and existing tenants are always happy with the accommodation that are provided by you. I'm not saying that's always on a new build. There is a site in the town centre it's located next to the old Laura Mitchell clinic. Residents there are going without water for up to 8 hours a day.
Nicole, can we just leave off?
I was just going to say,
okay,
Chair.
That's fine.
On this site, please. Thank you.
That's fine. Yeah. Councillor Patient said that, you know, one of the reasons he moved to Calderdale was, you know, great. It's a great area to be. Would you move to an area with no green spaces and with high pollution rates? And we've not answered the question that, you know, we've said that the climate change is the #1 priority. So why is the housing being prioritised over that? And how is it sustainable and in the interest of climate change to build housing where families are forced to travel out of the area for primary education provision because the local schools reduce their intake by 30?
Hi, Chair. Just the order of the questions, we do need to go to Councillor Lee Bellinger, then Taylor next, please. And then followed by that, it's Councillor Baines.
Yeah, right. Well, Councillor Lee hasn't got his hand up, so I asked him. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you.
Sorry, I have had my hand up for 10 minutes.
Were you in the yellow one, Stephen?
Yeah, it's just a few brief points. It has been made at Cabinet on the 4th of October. We were basically presented with 5 councillors, and they are all in wards that are getting virtually no extra housing in the local plan. I know Councillor Baines is our man with numbers, being an accountant. I'm not sure just what North Island Shelf is providing or expects to provide, but it is quite a good high number. So let's bear that one in mind. The other thing is, it was also presented as these 29 houses, if it actually comes to that, I don't think it would, personally, because I don't think the land's suitable, is going to save the housing crisis, which, of course, as Councillor Riveron has pointed out, has been going on since before the war. And I mean the Second World War, of course, not the Crimean. And it's well, like I say, I have 2 points, and I'll go through them briefly. We did hear what they said at Cabinet, but of course not all, obviously not all the panel were at. It is not just the only answer. I do appreciate what Sheridan was saying earlier about it's a big package and I appreciate that, but is this little tiny plot of land that the late Councillor Wainwright said in 2001 when I was on Cabinet, it's the last green lung in Claremont. Yes, I know Councillor Riveron talked about other spaces, but the plans for this aren't just about green space. There's about all sorts. I mean, I hope members of the panel have read every page of the 36. They've read the CVs of the people who've put the voluntary work in, the plans, the financial consideration, the fact that it's done on a calendar basis. It is more, this is unique. It's the most comprehensive, imaginary and professional business case put together by amateurs, and may have had some professional help, I don't know, but that's not the point, that I have ever seen of the capital asset transfers I've read. Very good professional one for North Arran Tennis Club, but they had a professional body draw it up for them. These guys haven't. It has all the details, plans over the years, all the costings, and I honestly think this is so unique, we ought to give it a go. And look, if it does go belly up in the year or two, the land will still be there. Someone's trying to come in, so I'll be quiet now.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Lee.
Thanks, Chair. I should say that I did have my hand up from the start.
No, I can't see it. Stephen, we're using the yellow hand signals.
Mine's on the screen.
Oh, sorry. Anyway, carry on. You started now, so my apologies.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, I'd like to commend Nicole and Rachel for an excellent presentation. And I'm sure everybody that's in on the meeting feels the passion and the very, very excellent case that they've put forward. And I would also echo Councillor Taylor's comments. The business plan is of the very highest quality. So I think it deserves to have this thorough discussion that we're having tonight, because frankly, the cabinet meeting was a great disappointment. There was hardly any discussion about the plan that these good people of Hawley Green have put together in large numbers to try to save this remaining space. The cabinet meeting was more about repeating their own objectives rather than considering the community asset transfer. I think a community asset transfer in this case is absolutely appropriate. Referring to the council's existing plans, the 2024 vision is exactly what saving this land is all about. The active vision for Calderdale epitomises saving this green as amenity land. It runs against the council's own declaration of a climate emergency, particularly in the area of pollution in an air quality management area. It doesn't make any sense to make an already polluted area even worse in a deprived area of the borough. Finally, I was very disappointed with the comments of both Councillor Patient and Rivron this evening. I thought they were getting into other areas of politics not relevant to this question under consideration tonight. Hawley Green and any other areas of Calderdale that are being considered for any kind of development are all unique and should be each considered on their own merits. And I think a very clear case has been made this evening for saving this amenity land in this area and going back to the cabinet and asking for far more discussion to get the thing right. We've already heard an offer from Together Housing. I think it was Mr. Patterson saying he'd be prepared to consider all sorts of other possibilities. Well, if the thing's still on the table, as it ought to be after this meeting, all of those possibilities, which is hopefully kindly referred to, can hopefully be accommodated in a different plan. Hopefully, the main plan being to stop the development in its entirety. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Patient, is that an old hand up or is it a new one?
It was a new one, Chair, but I'm aware there's people in the queue before me.
Oh, okay then. Kirsty was in next. Can you see? Okay then.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. We do have Councillor Bellinger.
Right.
We had Councillor Baines, and then we've got Councillor Dickinson. And then you may want to come back to Councillor Patient if he's happy with that.
Okay.
And then Councillor Scullion as well. Sorry.
Right. Okay. Sorry, all the hands aren't showing on my screen. That's the problem I've got. Councillor Bellinger.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and good evening, everybody. Quite an interesting discussion and quite a lot of passion involved in saving this green area. And I can see really that whatever decision is taken is going to have a negative impact on somebody, whether it's Together Housing or the Hawley Green Group. To me, I would say there needs to be a balance here, and I think there could be a balance. Because at the end of the day, if housing is not developed, if it's not developed here, obviously there needs to be somewhere else in Calderdale to find that housing. But looking at the area itself, and you're saying that there's the old playing fields at the far end and there's land there to the far end, could that not be developed on instead, or partly developed on, or both areas partly developed on? And then that way there's still going to be the two green areas left. So I think there's a compromise that could actually be had here, which hopefully will be satisfactory to both parties, keeping those green areas and having the development at the same time. What we've got to bear in mind as well, if this decision goes to full council, that decision could go in one direction, and it could be in the direction that we probably don't want this evening. So we've got to bear that in mind. So coming up with a decision that's balanced and beneficial for all is probably the best way forward this evening, if we can come to that agreement.
Thank you. Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Chair. I've heard the excellent comments which have been made by Nicole and Rachel, and I think I'll start off by looking at the local plan. In the North Arham and Shelf Ward area of Claremont, there was only 2 sites under consideration. One has already been developed into social housing by another housing housing developer, low cost housing developer, and that's right at the far end of Claremont Road. And the other one is this one. This is the only piece of green land left in the area for within North Arham and Shelf, which is not in the green belt, where the housing cannot take place. And although it's green belt, it's actually a steep sort of hilly area at the back of the Belgrave estates, and that's where you could see the hills behind this estate, the Belgrave estate. I actually, my first house I purchased in 1974 was one of the houses that overlook this site. It was number 8 Belgrave Crescent. At that time, apart from the older terraced houses in that vicinity, there was no other housing. It had all been gone, and it had been empty for, I think it was about 20 years before, about 20 years before my house was completed. So it's during that time, whilst I lived there, which I lived there for about 6 years, this was a well-used piece of land. There were a lot of people, came. They were playing. Children were playing, and people exercising, the dogs, etc. And that has never gone away from this piece of land. It is always well used by the community, and it's. I think it's atrocious that everything's going. It's from this area, and they deserve something. It's already been said that the schools are overflowing. I think most of the schools in North Arham and Shelf Ward are overflowing. You can't get them in. In North Arham and Shelf Ward itself, but it's not the Claremont area. It's Shelf and North Arham, where there is substantial proposals for development for housing, both low cost and not, and rather more expensive. In most of the other areas in North Arham and Shelf Ward, it is more expensive housing. And I mean, most of the houses, I think, which have been built in this area are relatively low cost. They're not high cost. Certainly, the Belgrave estate, a lot of it was sort of more for social housing at the time. So I think the people who've commented about this, I think I respect their comments, and I think more should be heard of them and taken into account. This is the only piece of green land, I repeat it, in this area that hasn't been developed. And is that fair to this community? Just bear that in mind when you vote later this evening. Thank you, and I'll close there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baines. I think you're next, Councillor Patient.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Really interesting to hear some of the arguments, and I don't think anyone would disagree that it's a very emotive subject. We've clearly got people on 2 very different sides, and I think both make a very, very compelling argument. It was asked earlier if I'd moved to somewhere without any, amenity to green space. I moved from inner city Manchester, and a cursory cycle and walk around this area over the last few months is a very, very different place than where I moved towards. Calderdale is one of the greenest boroughs in the north. No matter where you are, it is a very, very different picture than a lot of our inner city boroughs and Rochdale and Oldham and places like that. So I find the comparison a little bit unwieldy in that respect. I think the reality is, it's been mentioned about the recreation site that you've got there, and Councillor Bellinger handily spoke about developing that balance. And going back to what George was saying, is one of his ideas was potentially developing that site for recreation amenity again. And I think that could potentially be part of that balance, about bringing that space back into use. And that's as well as making sure that Hawley Green in and of itself is not just your idea of dystopian housing building. It is a community space with community amenity, access to growing, biodiversity has been mentioned, and all of those things. This is not trying to cram a lot of development into a small space in an inner city environment. This is actually putting 29 modern, energy efficient houses that are good for local people in a space that has good access to local green and amenity. I'm sorry to come back at that, but Shibden Park and stuff is only 10 minutes walk, and other access to green space isn't far away. It's got a very well connected access routes in and around it, in and around all the green space. And I think there is opportunity to do something quite different here. It was mentioned before about Northgate House and putting housing in that location. And of course, we do need housing in lots of different locations in and around Calderdale, and we do have plans to put even more housing in and around Halifax. In fact, Beach Hill is near enough to call that sort of town centre housing, if you will. But I think it would have been folly for us not to think about education and to think about putting business in the centre of Halifax, especially post-COVID, as we really want to build that economy back. I think what's important though, and I've listened to all of the arguments before, and you mentioned about the school capacity, and I think actually the reality is, when housing developments come on places, there is the opportunity to increase the PANs of different schools, and there's also the opportunity to perhaps develop more schools or potentially even increase class sizes. So that doesn't need to be the book closed in sort of that discussion. So I'm aware, Councillor Caffrey, that Councillor Scullion wants to come in, so I won't tread over sort of ground that we've already mentioned, but just thought it was good to sort of set the scene a little bit.
Thank you, Councillor Patient. Councillor Scullion.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just put my video on a minute, because I've been sitting here by candlelight. We're having intermittent power cuts, so I may disappear very suddenly. I think the discussion has been very interesting, and I want to commend the group who've been working on this. This was actually my second cabinet meeting in 2019, the discussion about this piece of land. And I think it's a very, very good illustration of the balance between best value for the whole borough versus best value for one ward. And I think in some ways it also illustrates the discussion we have about the local plan. Do you pepper pot development in lots of little places, or do you have the equivalent of a garden suburb? And it's a debate that absolutely rages in this council, it rages across the country. I wanted to just make some points. I am still on battery and candle, apologies. The point that Councillor Bellinger made was about the if this site is forgone, then what are the other sites that we're going to have in the local plan? It isn't simply a question of identifying areas. That's why we have focused on land which the council already owns. Much of the possible sites, brownfield sites, are too expensive to develop, and so which, if not this site, another site, do we have this on all of the smaller sites? In which case, in order to meet our housing numbers, we would have to increase the larger scale sites in the local plan, some of which are indeed on the green belt. So our principle is brownfield first, green space next, and green belt last. And this is a constant struggle we have to balance in terms of best value for the whole borough versus the needs and desires of one particular ward. I wanted to say a bit about the money. If this doesn't become housing, then we would have to forego a number of elements of money which this would accrue, not simply the capital receipt from the sale of the land to Together Housing, but the various other things which are part in the New Homes bonus and its successor, New Homes premium, etc. We would have to forego that money. And indeed, council tax of about 27,000 per annum. But I think the point has been made, and it's made a number of times, in terms of new homes for people, new homes that are of better quality than many of the homes or the temporary accommodation that people in, or the overcrowded homes. And as always, we have to balance that continued need for homes across the borough. And I'll stop there, Chair, before I set myself on fire with my candle. Apologies.
I would passionately feel, don't set fire to yourself. Councillor Dickinson.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to come back to my comments I made in my opening remarks about the greater good. I'm not completely reassured by Scott's points about almost creating a semi-rural idyll in the Hawley Green development there that we're talking about. The point being is that with that loss of green space in favour of housing development, that you would ultimately also be denying those new residents access to that green space. I mean, you're talking again about that 10 minutes to Shibden Park. You're right, it is only about from that end, but from people wanting to access green space, I'm going to have to travel further to get to there, and which is why that, according to the Friends of the Earth, Clement rates in the second worst category for access to green space, and that Shibden Park can't be considered a local green space under the access to green space measurements. The other point with regard to that, comes back down to the unused office space in terms of the carbon footprint of new build. I had an interesting discussion. Now, this was anecdotal, and I would be interested in exploring this further, is that actually converting the likes of office space into dignified, I emphasize dignified housing, takes up less effort. It takes up less carbon than actually building on new, and it would also give us that priority of ours to rejuvenate the likes of Halifax Town Centre by bringing people back into it. But yeah, I mean, I'll take on board Councillor Scullion's point about the extra patch of land that Paul, Councillor Benjamin was talking about. It's an interesting idea, which I think may be worth exploring. But in terms of the receipts as well and the money coming in, my main issue really is that if we do decide to go down the road of allowing this land to become building land, is that for years we've been talking about austerity and the brickbats that go forward and backwards about why we've had austerity and everything else. And it makes for dull listening. However, if we're not trying to maximize income on the sale of our, of our assets, then it really does sort of start to lose credence, really. Yeah, it's the denying the new residents, those new residents, access to the green spaces. If you wanted to make that point about one, perhaps. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. Anybody else want to speak before I wrap it up? Is that you, Dave? I can't see the hands on here. My screen's, I don't know what it is. I can't see the hands.
Hi, he's just unmuting himself, Councillor.
All right.
Right, thank you, Chair. We've had a very good presentation tonight by the Friends of Hawley Green and very passionate. But at the end of the day, the land's owned by the Calderdale Council. We badly need social housing in Calderdale. and is part of the partnership with Housing Together. So I move that we release the decision for implementation.
Can I just say to you, Dave, that the councils are like governments. They don't own anything. They don't own buildings. They don't have any money. It's owned by the people, not by the governments.
Well,
by taxpayers who provide the finance to councils. So technically, the council doesn't own anything, and neither does the government. I just thought I'd clarify that. It applies to everywhere, not just Calderdale Green.
I'll second that, Dave.
Well, hang on a minute, I haven't finished yet. Well, I'm going to wrap up in a minute, and then we're going to go to a vote. But I mean, obviously, we had a good debate. There've been some arguments
Hi,
on both.
Chair.
Hello, yeah.
Hi, we've got Sheila who's raised her hands to speak, the Director of Regeneration and Strategy.
Good evening, Chair. Sorry, I'll be very quick. I just thought it was incumbent on me just to remind members and to thank the Friends of Holly Green. And it's not an adversarial position. It's not an easy choice. We know that. But the challenge is that government has set a target of 300,000 homes and we have to play our part. Currently, we are not playing our part sufficiently. My mantra with the team is that every site matters and literally every home matters. I think one of the things that has happened in the conversation tonight is that we have conflated need and demand. And in actual fact, there isn't often the marrying of those two things, and what you have in Hawley Green is a need for housing and a demand. And it's a real opportunity where we do own the site and we should be showing that leadership to take it forward. We are in a position where we are failing very badly on our new home supply. If we are seen not to be taking these opportunities, we will be sanctioned further by government. We are already in a position where there is a presumption that sustainable development will happen in this borough, and we do not want to lose any further powers and lose that ability to influence and shape the lives of the people who live here. I'll leave it there, Chair, but I just thought it was important to remind.
Can I just ask you, Sheila? Yeah. What's the government going to do to us if we don't build enough houses?
So already we are 13. Well, the government can take our powers, so we can have designation where planning applications can be decided nationally by the National Planning Service. Chair.
I just thought you got me a bit worried there about us not meeting their targets and getting prosecuted.
No, we won't be prosecuted, but we lose that ability to shape and influence the borough.
I mean, the point is, what we're having a debate here really about, in terms of overall numbers, it's a bit of a drop in the ocean because we might get 29, we might get 9, we might not get any. Depends on the viability study. And if together do a viability study, as I'm sure George will say and agree with me, if it's not cost effective, they simply won't build it. So, you know, we can't guarantee we're going to get 29, and we certainly won't get 29 affordable houses. We might get some, but we won't going to get 29, and that's a maximum. Anyway, that aside, I'm going to go to the vote in a minute. I mean, we had one proposal, so I'll carry that in. But I think what I'm a bit annoyed about with this is that we've sort of led the Friends of Hawley Green the garden path. We've said you can have an asset transfer, you work at it. They put a lot of time into it. It's been approved by one part of the council. They've done it on very little resources, and it's been demolished in a 15-minute cabinet hearing. And I just find that attitude to people who put all this work in, residents, is absolutely appalling that we've actually done it the way we've done it. But I'll say no more than that. We'll go to a vote. So we've had one proposal, which is release for implementation. Has anybody got any counter proposals, please? Councillor Bellinger.
Yes, Chair. I'd refer the decision back to Cabinet, setting out in writing the nature of the concerns and financial implications. And I think at the end of the day, a balance needs to be sought here as to where the development needs to be, not fully on that green area.
Okay. Anybody want to second that? Anybody have more proposals? Has everyone gone mute?
Councillor Dickinson's raised his hand, but I'm not sure whether he's seconding Councillor Bellinger's proposal.
No, I'm not really seconding Councillor Bellinger's proposal. I'd be wanting, if we can't support the asset transfer as an option to be voted on, I would like to modify the proposal that it's released for implementation to Together Housing, that the land is released onto the open market to maximise income from sale.
Well, we could put that down, but we need a seconder for that.
Chair, sorry, one of your options is to release the decision for implementation.
Yeah, I know. I'm waiting. I know. But I've got. If somebody's got some other recommendations, Chris, I've got to hear those as well, haven't I?
No, I understand. It's just a proposal there from Councillor
Yeah.
Dickinson. It had, well,
It's not on the
other
list.
factors to it. So it's just released for implementation. As Councillor Bellinger said, it's refer the decision back to Cabinet,
Or
setting
refer
out
it
in
to
writing the nature of its concerns and financial implications. Or the third option is to refer the matter to full council. They're the only options that you can take.
Yeah, and I'm waiting for somebody to second Councillor Bellinger's proposal. Anybody want to do that, or should I do it? I'll do it then. All right, I'll second that one, Councillor Bellinger. It goes back to Cabinet for a rethink. So can place members have a vote? Firstly, release the decision for implementation.
All those in favour, Chair.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry, can I just say, Chair, you need to go to, you've had a request to release the decision.
Yeah.
Then you've had an amendment.
Yeah.
You need to vote on the amendment first, and if that falls, it goes back to the first one.
So we vote on option 2 first.
You've gone to option 2, so now you need to vote on option 2 first.
Right. Okay. Well,
option 1.
That's what I've just. Right. Okay then. So option 2 is refer the decision back to Cabinet, setting out why we're going to do it. So who's in favour of that? Can somebody count these, please? Because I can't see on the screen.
We've got 1, 2, 3.
Okay. How many?
4, I think, Chair. I think Councillor Dickinson, Councillor Bellinger, Councillor
I saw 5.
Beach.
Sorry, Chair. We had councillors who are not members of this board raising the hand there. We do have Councillor Dickinson who's raised his hand, Councillor Bellinger, Councillor Beach, and we have the 3 members who have raised their hands in favour.
Plus me, that's 4.
Right, I didn't see you raise your hand.
Well, no,
sorry, I thought I saw Roger Taylor raise his hand.
He's not a member of this board, Councillor Lee.
He's not a panel
I'm
member.
only an honorary member, unfortunately, Stephen.
Right. Okay. So that's 4 in favour of option 2. Option 1 is release decision for implementation.
Chair, sorry, I think you need to take a vote against that.
You need to take those against.
Well, those against then. I assumed that.
So that's Smith, Young.
Right, so we have 1, Councillor Faisal, Councillor Riffron, Councillor Young, Councillor Smith, and Councillor Clark. So we've got 5 against.
Right. Okay. So that falls then. So the next one is you have to keep. I think I'm doing this right. Release for implementation. Who wants to vote for that?
It's the same members, Chair. We've got 5 votes for.
Those against.
One, 2, 3, 4 against. 3 against. Sorry, Councillor Beach didn't raise his hand.
Okay. Well, it's irrelevant anyway. Right. Well, sorry, friends of Hawley Green, but that's gone against you by 1 vote, I'm afraid. But thanks for coming and thanks for your presentation. I'm very sorry about that. But that's democracy for you. So that's the way it works. Thanks everybody for coming and attending, and thanks for your contributions. It was at least it was a lively debate, if nothing else.